Hey, this is Pat, and you're listening to the I Used to Think podcast. This is a podcast about people who were brave enough to change their mind. After diligently raising her children in the church, homeschooling them, and raising them in conservative Christianity, Regan was shocked when her son Jonas confessed to not believing in the existence of God anymore. Regan discusses how she saw proper Christian parenting as a step-by-step process that guaranteed the perseverance of her children's faith. The shift in her son's faith made it difficult for Regan to watch other Christian parents send their kids off on mission trips or marry their kids to other young Christians. We discussed Regan's journey leaving an abusive church and learning to trust a new community, realizing the importance of community in sustaining her during this difficult time, as well as being a community for her son, regardless of his religious beliefs. We also talk about the developmental appropriateness of questioning belief during adolescence. Regan shares honestly about her own faith has been challenged and refined as she navigates these realities. Thank you so much for listening. As a reminder, feel free to follow us on Instagram at I Used to Think Podcast, and there's also a YouTube channel for the podcast, which you can find in the description. Let's get into it. Okay, I'm here with Regan today on the podcast. Regan, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And for hosting in your beautiful home.
Thanks. I'm glad you're here. It's nice to have you here.
I thoroughly enjoyed dinner.
Good. I'm glad.
Is that a common recipe around here?
It's only the second time I've made it. First time I made it, the rice didn't come out well. So this was a success tonight. I'm glad I could impress. I used to cook a lot, and I kind of got burnt out around year 15. Okay. So I started to tell Matt, I was like, you have to start cooking. And so he pitches in probably once or twice a week. And so he has his like go-tos that he can do. Okay. But I like to experiment a little bit. We just got the subscription to the New York Times. Okay. And their cooking section is phenomenal. I've never had a bad recipe.
You sent me the recipe via text to make sure I wasn't allergic to anything in it. And then when I clicked on the link, it asked me to subscribe to the New York Times.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
They're going to be like, you want this recipe? Pay up. Man, yeah. I'm going to have to do screenshots if you ever want the recipe, I'll just do that. Okay.
It's okay. Yeah. So just letting you know, it actually still was a gamble for me because I just looked at the title of the recipe.
So you didn't speak up at all. You're like, pine nuts are in this. Great. Almonds. Perfect.
Let's get into the icebreaker then.
Okay.
Just so that our audience get to know you better. And this icebreaker is sort of related to our topic. Okay. The idea of family. What did your grandparents do for a living, if you know? Mm-hmm. And is it related at all to anything you do now?
Oh, I love that question. What a great question. My grandparents on my mother's side, I knew well, and I was really close to them. My grandfather, Herc Carlson, was he was enlisted in the Army in World War II and the Korean War. Okay. I'm almost positive. If my mom's listening to this, she can correct me later. And then, so when my grandmother and grandfather first got married, he was enlisted. And I think they were on the Army base in Palm Springs for a period of time. And after that, he did some jobs, and he was extremely good with his hands. He was very handy and industrious. And so he always was involved with building houses, painting houses. For many years, he did a lot of those sort of handyman, odd jobs. Okay. And he may have had a sort of desk job for a period of time, but I don't remember. My grandmother, Jenna Carlson, short for Virginia, she was a really passionate community builder, but it looked like a homemaker. Okay. She was really involved in her church, and she was obviously raising my mom and my mom's sister and brother. But in addition to raising them, she was very much involved in the church life, caring for people, caring for dying people, bringing meals, and then also hosting. She was an incredible hostess. So she was bringing people together. And she also taught Bible studies for years and years and was a very strong proponent of women teaching in the church. Okay. And yeah, so if I'm like them, if I have jobs like them, I'm a lot like my grandma. My grandma was also very judgmental and outspoken, which I can be like too.
Honest? Okay.
I have like, we referred to her as Mormor, which is Swedish for mother's mother.
Okay.
Because they were of Swedish heritage. And so I have a Mormor streak in me when I would get like super judgmental, and my family calls me out for it. So.
And this is on your mom's side?
Yeah.
Okay.
My mom's side.
Do you know what your grandparents did on your dad's side?
So I know my father's mother. She passed away a couple of years ago, and she was essentially like money manager, bookkeeper. Her and her second husband ran apartment buildings and managed apartment buildings.
Okay.
I didn't know them as well.
Okay.
But that's what they did. And he owned, my grandmother's second husband owned a bunch of like spas.
Okay.
Yeah, and gyms back in the 70s and 80s when they were just like primarily bodybuilders.
Oh.
And then in the 70s and 80s, it started to like expand to just regular people would go to the gym.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is very common now.
Yeah, super common now.
And you don't manage a gym right now? Or a spa? Okay.
Nope. I don't know if I'm glad I don't or disappointed. I don't know. It might be kind of cool to run like an Equinox. Not an Equinox, a 24-hour fitness. Equinox clients would be a pain in the butt.
Well, I'm a 24-hour fitness customer, so...
Sweet. You're the type of person I would want to have around. I don't want... I was a member of Equinox for a minute, and I felt like embarrassed that I was there.
You said more is Swedish?
Yeah.
Okay, so I assume you identify more with your Swedish heritage?
I'm a mutt. I mean, I was Swedish, Irish, something. They were like 50% Swedish.
Okay.
And so by the time you get to me, it's like, I'm a mutt. I don't know what I am. I'm a white lady.
Okay. Do you draw any inspiration? I think you hinted at this, but do you draw any inspiration in your work now from what your grandparents did?
Yeah, there's plenty of stories about my grandmother. My grandfather was very hospitable and warm as well, but took more of a back seat, was more soft-spoken, was more quiet, an introvert. And my grandmother was definitely an extrovert, and if she saw the need, she would do something about it. She didn't care. Like, she didn't see those boundaries.
Yeah.
So while she could at times be judgmental, deep down, there was a very deep faith and a really deep compassion for people, especially people that didn't have what they needed. They were very, very poor and still were very generous with food, with helping neighbors. So my grandma and my grandpa on my mom's side certainly have a legacy. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I'll allow you to take a minute to introduce yourself however you want to. How would you describe Regan? Who are you?
Regan is a mom and a wife and a CEO and a friend and a perimenopausal woman really going through it hormonally, and a person who likes to laugh and a person who likes conversation. So my current job is leading a nonprofit organization. You are on the board of that organization, Seen and Heard. And together, we make sure that young people that are exiting the foster care system and entering adulthood have the tools that they need to deal with stress and life. So we help them become better communicators and tolerate stress. And we use the performing arts as the way to make sure that they know who they are and they know they have worth and value.
I'll just say it's been incredible to have a close-up look at how the organization is run.
Thank you.
It's been awesome.
I'm glad you say that, because sometimes when people go behind the curtain, they're like, whoa, get me out of here. Yeah, nonprofit work is really hard.
Yeah.
It's just really hard. And I certainly didn't go to school for nonprofit management. Nobody taught me how to do this. So I'm really thankful for people that came before me who were willing to allow me to look over and cheat off their homework and be on the phone with me, talking me down if I didn't know how to do something.
If I remember correctly, you were a theater major. Okay.
Yeah.
I read a stat just yesterday, I think. It's like 27% of people are doing something related to their major.
Oh, like only 27% of people?
Yes.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Don't you think? I mean, you were just sharing that you were a communications. Well, this is communications, isn't it? But you're in real estate.
Right.
which is also communications. But communications is such a broad major.
It's very broad.
But yeah, I think plenty of people think they know who they're going to be. And then they find out years later that like, oh, that's not what I want to do at all.
Yeah. Again, I appreciate you taking the time to be here. You were willing to suggest a topic that's very personal to yourself. That I just want to say in advance, I appreciate you being willing to choose that topic.
Thanks.
And so I'll let you go ahead. What did you used to think?
I used to think that if you trained up a child in the way they should go, they will not depart from it. And now I think it's a lot more complicated than that.
Okay.
A lot more complicated than that.
Yeah. What is the story behind this statement?
So I have 2 sons, one who would identify as a Christian still, and the other one who identifies as an atheist. And he shared that information with me and my husband like maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay.
And it was really traumatic because I had become a parent during a day and age where the homeschooling movement was pretty big, and there was, in my particular church, there was like a strong sort of, not a formula. Actually, it wasn't really a formula, but there was a subtext of like, if you are a mom and you do these things, your kids will believe in Jesus.
Okay.
And so I sort of fell into that. It'll sound crass to call it like an industry, but there is like this sort of unspoken idea in many evangelical spaces and churches that if you can get your kid plugged in like to a great youth group and all this stuff, that they're going to either stay a Christian or they're going to become a Christian. And sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't happen. So in the case of my younger son, that hasn't happened. And so it's been a point for me of like deep spiritual disappointment, deep sadness, and then deep questioning.
Did he grow up going, you said youth group, so he started going to church since birth, essentially?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was raised in the church, homeschooled in a Christian co-op, sent to Christian schools. Like I did all the things that James Dobson told me to when I was raising my child. James. Like,
yeah.
I think I had one of his books and I maybe read part of it. So I wasn't like a fan. Okay. I just was like, but those types of ideas really trickle down. So even though you don't have his book,
right,
there are things that he talks about that get shared from the pulpit, if that makes sense.
While you were raising your children, was there a conscious goal in your head of, I'm doing this so they don't leave the faith?
Absolutely.
Okay.
100%. Because I want to be with them in heaven. Like, when you have a child, your whole world changes. And you can't imagine what your life was like before that child. It's a level of love that I don't think a lot of people talk about. It's like, you're married and you're in love with your wife. And your children, it's obviously a different kind of love, but it is just as intense. Yeah.
I'm curious if you compare differences in maybe the way you brought up both of your sons. Did you think about what did I do wrong with one of them that I did right with the other one?
I haven't thought about comparing the 2 different styles of how I raised them as much as comparing my parenting with other families or other moms.
Okay.
But to your question, I certainly parented them very differently. The difference between your first kid and your second, third, or fourth is huge because the first one is the pancake you burn, If you never heard that.
I've never heard that.
The first kid is the practice, right? And so my older son, poor Jude, he unfortunately endured a lot of really bad parenting. We were doing the best we could.
Yeah.
But we were also young. We had kids. I was 26 when he was born, and it's fairly young. And I think when you're a young parent, there's so many advantages. Like you have more endurance and physical stamina and energy, but you may lack a little bit of patience and wisdom. So unfortunately, there was I certainly made errors with him. Jonas also, my younger son, who identifies as the atheist. And by the way, I have permission to share this. Like, I've already talked to him about that. Mm-hmm. But Jonas was like a really, really academically strong kid. And also behaviorally, he was very compliant. He never got into trouble, maybe once. And so he flew under the radar. And so there wasn't as much attention paid to him as my older son, who was much more adventurous, like much more experimental, much more, he would push against the sort of boundaries. And so he appeared to be more like of the dramatic than one with all of the problems, the needs. And I don't mean that like he had a lot of problems. It was just, he just was different. And so because of that, he also had like learning difficulties. And like, he's in such a beautiful, stable, amazing place. And I adore him. And I just like being with him. But yeah, they're just different people.
Sure. Yeah. So there was no pushback from Jonas towards church or religion or Bible studies or anything like that?
Not until after we left our community. So we left our community just due to a lot of things, but our experience of like spiritual manipulation and spiritual abuse took place. And it was a really rough departure because we were kind of in the inner circle and our kids were deeply a part of that community and really loved that community, as did we. And so the departure from that was like a true turning point.
Okay.
And I think it gave Jonas the opportunity to start being more honest about what he thought.
Okay.
And so I think for him, it was a turning point as far as like, maybe I can say, I don't really know. And so it started with the like, I don't really know. And then it's at the current state, it's at, I don't think there is a God. And by the way, I'm not putting that on our departure from the church. I think the way his brain is wired is the way his brain is wired. And it's very, very hard for him to conceive of a God. And I've come to see like, oh, that's similar to someone who maybe we'll get there, but I understand that his choice to be an atheist has so much more to do with the way he is wired. And I think some of it has to do with what he's seen, both in America and in our leaving of that particular community. So there's a jaded quality to it, but that's every 19-year-old adolescent is like, I don't know about that.
I'm not sure if I've ever told you, but I grew up homeschooled.
Okay.
And I wasn't in the James Dobson influence circles, but I was in the Bill Gothard circles.
Oh, no.
For about 5 years.
You were
4 to 5 years.
Isn't he the umbrella guy? James Gothard had the umbrella illustration of God's governance. So there was the big umbrella, which is very familiar. God. And then there was like underneath the big umbrella of God is like man. It was like headship. The husband then is covering his wife, who is then covering the children. Don't go look it up. Okay. It's deeply upsetting.
Is this because you watched the documentary?
Yeah.
Okay. But I haven't seen it.
I wouldn't recommend it then. Okay. But that concept has trickled into my life in other places.
Okay.
You don't have to be in that particular community to still have that sort of like subtext underneath church governance, even within certain denominations where maybe they don't allow women to be elders or pastors. It's just a diluted version of like what headship looks like or leadership.
I agree with you. Yeah. I brought this up because I even mentioned it just, about 30 minutes ago when we were eating dinner, that I do question why me in terms of this type of survivor's guilt, because there were a lot of problematic things about Gothard circles.
Yeah.
And, I won't be able to relate completely to Jonas's story, but I grew up homeschooled and very conservative and that sort of thing. What was the reaction? You said it was very traumatic when Jonas basically confessed or revealed that he identified as an atheist. How did that whole thing play out?
I remember where we were, and I remember he was really, really scared and emotional when he was sharing this. And the only way I would maybe draw a parallel is to like if a kid was coming out.
Okay.
It clearly took a lot of courage on his part to share what he knew he needed to share. The only early sign I ever got where I was like, is he actually went to talk to a pastor at our old church about confirmation. Or no, baptism, because we didn't baptize them as infants. We wanted them to make their own decision, but we forced it at age 7.
So you just delayed it.
We're like so much better than those Catholics, right? Like we really want them to know what they're getting into. And so at 6, we're like pushing them towards a conversion moment.
Okay.
But for Jonas, I think he was maybe 10 and he met with Paul Kim.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember him at all, but
yes,
he's a great guy, wonderful pastor. And Paul came out of their meeting and Matt and I are like, oh, great. He's going to go through with being baptized and yay. And Paul was like, yeah, I don't think he's ready. Like, and so that was like a what? And Paul was so diplomatic, so kind, and like, yeah, I think he's still really wrestling with stuff. Why don't you give him some time? And me as a mom was like, no, we have to do this next month. Like, I was just like, hurry. Because in my mind, once my kid signs on the dotted line, it's done. Yeah. Right. And they're in, and I did it. Yeah. And they're safe. And so he then later went to be baptized, and he confessed in that moment when he was saying I don't believe this. He felt forced to do that, and that broke my heart. I didn't realize I was forcing him to do that, but we were. And
what was your response when he first self-identified as an atheist?
I think my first reaction was like, oh, this is a phase. Once again, going back to like the coming out story. It's like, you're not really gay, or oh, this is just a stage, right? I think I was like, oh, okay. Like I was like, oh, okay, sure, okay. And then he was very resolute, like not necessarily in that moment, but like later on, because I was thinking, oh, now I got to go back and really lay down the 4 spiritual laws, or like now I got to go back and really get into scripture. Yeah. And so that was causing a lot of harm in our relationship. So after he's like, I don't believe that there is a God, I was like, okay, well, let me just go back and fix this. Okay. And that is essentially dishonoring something that he had the courage to say and how he genuinely feels too. Right. Yeah.
Was there a conversation afterwards because I'm assuming he was still at home, he wasn't in college.
He was in high school. It was a senior year of high school, junior or senior year. Okay. Yeah. Were there conversations around, okay, now you don't have to go to church with us, or how did that sort of change? Yeah. There was a discussion about letting him know he didn't have to come to church with us if he didn't want to go to church with us. Okay. But I actually might want to go back and ask him that question. If he were in the room, he might be like, no, you were still encouraging me, because I'm knowing who I am and how persistent I am. Maybe I was like, well, let's try other churches. Like, I'm pretty sure I said, would you like to try different churches? And like, he's like, no. And, he currently works at the church we go to and runs slides from like the little booth. Okay. And really loves who he works with, and our community really loves him. And they're not trying to like convert him, which is so strange for a church to just let him be. Right. I didn't grow up in an environment like that. No, I'm sure. I don't know very many places that would just let him cook, like just let him be, like leave him alone. Yeah. And just like but they really like him. And I think there's something really amazing about a community, a Christian community that just likes him and doesn't see him as a project. Have you ever felt like somebody was just friends with you because they wanted something from you? That's what I feel when I bump into a street evangelist. Yeah. But imagine that, but with somebody who is doing life with you, or in your space, in your social world, in your fabric, who is just constantly going in to be like, how's your heart? How's your relationship with Jesus? Like, that would be really awful for him to be in a community like that. But thankfully, God, being God, in my view, has placed my son in a community of Christians who are happy to be around Jonas. And that to me feels like what Jesus would do.
Yeah.
Like genuinely just really liking my kid. So even though Jonas does not view it as God placing him in that community, I'm very thankful that he enjoys working there.
For yourself, by the time that Jonas was honest with you and your husband, had your views on all that homeschool stuff changed at all? Or your belief that that was the way to raise your child?
I had gone through a certain personal deconstruction of sorts, like a deconstruction light as we moved away. So my views on certain issues have changed as a result of like leaving one community and stepping into another, which I think is really normal.
Yeah.
But I think until Jonas said, I don't really think there is a God, or I don't believe there is a God, I felt pretty confident that I had raised a kid to grow up to be a Christian. Like I had done the right things so that he would grow up and be a Christian.
Right, the checklist or whatever.
Well, that's the verse. If you train up a child in the way they should go, they will not depart from it. It's a this, then that. If this, then that. And so much of Christian faith is if this, then that. And so I think it leads all of us to sort of feel like, oh, this bad thing happened to me because I didn't do that thing, right? Or I have this great thing because I did this thing, right? We look at marriages, we look at relationships that way. There's plenty of people that honored God in their dating relationship, got married, and still have a lot of problems, or maybe their relationships end in divorce. Like, so it's just not the if this, then that. And also, there is truth, I think, to if you do X, then Y will happen. So it's like a duality that's really hard to reconcile.
Yeah. You mentioned now things are complicated. What does that mean?
What was I referencing when I said that?
The second half of your I used to think.
Oh, yeah. Now it's complicated. What's really complicated is there was a period about a year and a half after he shared that he was an atheist where I had sort of stopped bothering him.
Okay.
And stopped. So it started with the extreme of like, well, have you read this chapter in the Bible? Have you read this book? And then it sort of like faded into like, oh, this is a cool podcast episode. Why don't you give it a read? Or like, look at this article. Like I went all the way from here and now I let it go because of some conversations I've had with God that are really scary. Because what an atheist or unbelieving kid does to a parent who's a Christian is force that person to look at the very heart of God and the very fundamental nature of who God is. Yeah. Because if I love my kid so much, and I believe there's a God that's looking at that same child or adult and is like, yeah, you're not in. Wow. Like, oh, wow. And so I think if I were to still be in a very conservative, fundamental environment, I think the answer to that was, well, look at what Jesus said. Like, if you want to follow me, you have to hate your brother and sister, right? And so there's a lot of conservative and fundamental Christian homes that are like everything from like cutting off fellowship completely or just being like, well, I guess you're choosing hell, right? That doesn't work for me. I want a relationship with my kid. It's not so straightforward or it's complicated is like, what if my kid's in? What if my kid's going to heaven? What if my kid is completely loved by God, even if he did not believe that God was real? I don't know if there's anything theologically to hang my hat on with that idea, but that's just where I am.
Yeah.
And that really messes up everything on a really like on the ground floor level of the Christian model. That disrupts a lot of things. So it's like the Jenga thing that you pull out and everything falls down. I don't feel like I'm in danger of losing my faith by any means, but it's been a moment of just like fear and reckoning and like wrestling with who are you? who are you? Which I've had to do before anyway, with other situations, like as a foster parent with our first kid that was in our home. After 6 months, they were returned to their biological family in another state. That was a real loss. Mm-hmm. And I thought I knew what was going to happen. I knew how this story would end. And I had to turn that kid over and mentally and emotionally be like, I trust God with whatever God's doing in that kid's life.
Do you know anyone else with a similar story to you as far as this situation? And have people around you discouraged you from changing your theology, or what has been the response been from other Christians?
I haven't shared this. Like, I haven't talked openly about, like, maybe God loves everybody and everyone's going to heaven. Because that's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Or maybe we could make it a little bit more like theologically palatable. You know, the verse about like every knee will bow. Everyone will recognize that God is who God says he is. Well, what if that happens at judgment, right? Where we are all looked at and reviewed and we all face the choices we made here on earth. But when we see the goodness of God in front of us, we're going to be like, I was wrong. Like, I'm so sorry. And God's like, cool, we're good. Get in there, right?
Yeah.
That would be amazing. That to me squares with all the beauty and goodness that I've seen of who God is. But again, I don't have a lot of theological, like, I can't back that up a whole lot.
Yeah.
But the women that I have seen that have had their children walk away from the Lord, I've seen incredible grief and incredible worry dominate their life.
Okay.
So the women that I've been in small groups with or Bible studies with back in the day, I would look at these women who have college kids or adult children who have walked away from the Lord, and they are just really grieved by it, as is totally understandable, but it becomes something they carry forward everywhere with them. And that makes sense to me. Like, if you lost someone that you love, you are always in a kind of mourning. So I don't want to judge them, but there's something about that I was like, I don't want to be like that.
Yeah.
I don't want to constantly be. I pray for Jonas every day. I pray that he would believe that there is a God that loves him, because I believe there is a God who loves him, you know? And I do think that his life will go better here on earth if he believes that as well. I think he will be happier. I think he will be more secure. I think so. So I haven't lost my desire to have him know that there is a God who loves him.
This is a side note, but have you read St. Augustine's Confessions or are familiar with it?
I think I have the book somewhere. I think I probably read it a long, long time ago, but what are you thinking? What is something coming to mind for you?
What you just shared reminds me of him saying that his mother's prayer saved him. And I'm no historian, but she prayed for him a very, very long time.
Yeah?
Yeah, and this was the year like 300. Yeah, that's what came to my mind.
I hope so. Every time I'm in church and I light a candle for my children, I always pray that he would believe there is a God who loves him. And then this past period of Lent, I fasted, which I've never done.
Fasting.
I hate it. I am not, and it doesn't actually, this was the first time I did like a true like sun up to sundown fast for the whole period of Lent. So I would eat like really early in the morning, and then I would eat at dinner.
Oh, wow.
And I did it because I wanted my son to know that God was real. And still, at the end of the Lent period, I was like, all right.
Like a bargain with...
It's the same thing. It's, if I do this, God, you're going to do that. And Jonas is still an atheist. And yeah.
This conversation is timely because just this past Sunday I had a conversation with my friend David, who's... I don't think he said his son identified as an atheist, but he just said his son wasn't going to church and didn't profess faith. And one thing that I thought demonstrated a lot of self-awareness on David's part was he said that he sees himself in his son, so he remembers what it was like to be 19. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering if for yourself, there was those kinds of thoughts, like I was questioning or I was rebellious during that time in my life as well.
I was certainly rebellious at that time in my life, but I never went through a period of unbelief or doubt. I don't know why. I've never been that way. I will say, though, and I think this is really important, that parents need to allow their children to go through the appropriate developmental stages. And I think in Christian communities, we observe those developmental stages less and less as kids get older. So while it's like socially acceptable to have a toddler who's not potty trained yet, it's not socially acceptable to have a 16, 17, 18-year-old that's wilding out, who's acting crazy and who's in a lot of trouble. And so, and that's not Jonas, by the way. But what I'm saying is it is very developmentally appropriate for someone Jonas's age to be like, I don't really think this is true, and I'm going to differentiate my beliefs from my parents. That is really appropriate. And I would go so far as to say that in many cases, if we leapfrog over that developmental stage, we can cause a lot of trouble later on in our lives, in our marriages and our relationships, because we didn't actually go through that particular stage. Because I've seen a lot of Christian parents, what they really like to do is after the Christian high school, send their kid to the Christian college and then get that kiddo married. Do it as fast as possible. And I think that works. I know people where that has been a really beautiful story and that's been right for them.
Yeah.
I also walk alongside people that have looked back and thought, I married someone that was not only like not a good fit, but they were incredibly abusive. Or I realized I was gay this whole time and I didn't know that. There's so many people that just went straight through without actually making mistakes, learning like any of that. And it can cause real problems later on when they're 30 or 40 and they realize that they skipped a really important chapter of their life. And I'll also confess that there's a jealousy I have when I look around and I see other families who have kids that are going off on their missions trips or who are marrying Christian guys or girls, they're so awesome and they're in this Christian relationship and they're getting married. There's a part of me that feels jealous because like I took my kids on missions trips. What the hell, man? Like what? I did all those things and now I have two amazing young men. Amazing. I love being with them. I think they're incredible and intelligent and funny and authentic and polite and really good human beings. But one of them is like, I actually don't think God's real.
I echo that. I just had the privilege of meeting Jonas and having dinner with him. He's a very thoughtful person.
He is, yeah.
And I can tell he has a knack for thinking through things critically, which fits with the story you're telling me.
Yeah, he's really smart.
But we just had a crazy 30-minute conversation about the masculinity crisis and orthodoxy, and I loved it.
Yeah, isn't he great? Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate that. Yeah, he's so great, and I have a lot of respect for Jonas. And I'm glad now that even though I disagree with his view that there is no God, I have a lot of respect for how he came to that conclusion.
You mentioned that a lot of prayers going on right now, a lot of fasting and attempts at fasting. For yourself, do you think digging into this theologically or intellectually will bring any comfort? You said you haven't really looked into, what are different views of eternal damnation or salvation or things like that? Or is it just more so, I'm just going to see how this plays out and keep praying?
No, I'd like to. I would like to. I think that there is also a fear that if I read something I'll give you an example. So last Sunday, I was asked to read scripture at my church. Okay. And the passage was, I think, Matthew 25, where Jesus is talking about separating the goats and the sheep. And how the question he's asking is, when you saw the least of these, did you feed them? Did you clothe them? Like, right. Because if you did, you were doing it for me. You were doing it to me, right? Yeah. And the goats were like, well, when did we see you walking around like hungry? Like, what are you talking about? And he repeats it again. And then he basically says, depart from me, like go off into the eternal fire with the weeping and gnashing. And so when I... Thankfully, the pastor pulled that passage from the reading, and I was reading a different thing that morning. But okay. I walked up to him later, and I was like, Dr. Carter, why did you pull that passage? And he was like, oh, it didn't kind of align with what I was really wanting to drive home today. And I was like, I was really struggling with that particular passage. And I was like, do you think Jesus is talking about, like, sending all these people to hell? Right. And Dr. Carter was like, we all have choice. And what Jesus is talking about is the choice we have to attend to the least of these, and how important that is. And right. how while we're here, we need to make sure that we're attending to that need, because that's what Jesus would be doing. And we are to see Christ in every person on the margins in need. And he's like, as for the get out of here and go to the eternal damnation, he's like, it is also a book that, and also a story that is an illustrative story. And so he's like, he was essentially saying, let's grab coffee. That's a conversation I want to continue because I trust him a lot, and he's very intelligent and compassionate. So like, yeah, I want to continue to look at things, but I'm also afraid that if I find something that disproves my current hope, I don't know what I'll do.
Sure. Yeah.
I feel stuck. I don't know what I would do. What would you do? I'm sorry to turn the table, but I just am like, what do you think about that? Or have you ever had to reconcile something where it cost you something really important?
I can't speak from the perspective of a parent. I think these topics that we're discussing as far as salvation and different theories of salvation are things I've wrestled with, I would say, within the past year and a half. You actually texted me the title of a book that was related to your topic, which is Sinners in the Hands of a Loving God, which is a play on the Jonathan Edwards sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. And so let me preface this with saying most of my research was via ChatGPT.
That's cool.
So take it however you want. To address what your pastor brought up, what's interesting about the passages where Jesus talks about hell, basically, which he doesn't actually use the word hell. He uses another word. I think it's
like Sheol
or Gehenna, which is a city in Israel, which was I guess, basically the garbage dump of Israel at that time. They would just throw trash there.
Yeah.
Is that every time he brought up hell, it was in relation to the abuse of the least of these, or the religious intolerance of the Pharisees. And always relating injustice to hell. People who perform acts of injustice or acts against the vulnerable. And a clear example is when he says that whoever takes advantage of the children should have a millstone tied around his neck, thrown into the ocean, which is a very
really graphic
image. That stood out to me. I had never thought of that. And I guess so. I haven't read the book, but the author is Brian Zond, who wrote Sinners in the Hands of a Loving God. His views seem to align with the Eastern Orthodox views.
Oh, interesting.
Hell, which is really interesting to me. And I haven't really looked into yet. But the idea of hell being an experience of God's love from those who rejected him. And so hell is more of a experience of God's love depending on how you've positioned yourself for or against God.
Oh, explain more.
It's more of a sort of like a state of mind. If you cherished God, receiving his love will feel comforting. And if you, I don't know what the right word is, hate God or rejected God, then experiencing his love will hurt, basically. And so I didn't intend to get too theological with this because my own thoughts aren't even that fleshed out. But I think what's helpful to me about different views of hell is that it leaves room for mystery, because the reality is Jesus talked about money a lot more than he talked about hell. He talked a lot about the poor than he talked about hell. And so I think what's challenging, especially because I also come from a very fundamentalist background, is that any views of hell, that any alternative theories of hell that I'm hearing, everything's in contrast to what I grew up with, which is hell is a physical place where you're burning for eternity. And I will say what I appreciate about the Eastern Orthodox is that they leave room for mystery. And that's just something, as a I'll identify as a former fundamentalist Christian, I don't quite have in my vocabulary yet. I don't quite think in terms of mystery.
Yeah, life will help you with that. I speak as your elder in this moment because I am a lot older than you. Life will help you with that, with the mystery. You can't be a Christian, in my opinion. You're not a Christian that's growing if you're not allowing life to really teach you about the unknown and about the mystery. So I would recommend, if you're interested in Falling Upward, which is a great book by Richard Rohr.
Oh, okay.
And he specifically addresses the sort of first half of life, importance of theological richness, scripture, like how similarly to like a concert pianist, they start in their early years with scales. Like you know the theory, you know the scales. So Richard Rohr isn't saying that all of that is not important. He's saying, no, it really is important. But if you stay there throughout your whole life, you are in a state of arrested development, or you are in an emotionally or spiritually immature state of being for the rest of your life. Whereas his argument is there's this second half of life that recognizes and beholds mystery. And is comfortable with, I don't know.
Yeah. That's an interesting thing to me about Christ's interactions with people around him in the New Testament. We don't ever really get the second half of the story. And
oh, how so?
With people I think about the woman who committed adultery and was about to be stoned. And well, the first thing that stood out to me is he addressed the people who were threatening to stone her first, before he addressed the adulteress or the woman who committed adultery. And then he told her, go and sin no more. And that was the end of the story. That's it. We don't know the second half.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we don't know all the time. I was thinking this morning, actually, about the woman at the well and how powerful it was that Jesus entered into essentially what was a theological debate with this woman who was a nobody.
Yeah.
And he engaged with her on that. And I think when I read that section, I'm like, oh, she was trying to avoid intimacy by using an argument. Or maybe she wasn't trying to avoid intimacy with Jesus. Maybe she was really hurt about the religious oppression she may have been experiencing, right? So who knows what it was. But the fact that he stops and engages with her in such an honoring way and life-affirming way.
Right.
And then she leaves, and we do get to hear kind of the second half where she's like, isn't she the one that says, go? She runs back to her village and she says, come with me to meet a man that told me everything I ever did. Woo! It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so much subtext. I mean, he, for one, should not, and when I say should not, I mean culturally shouldn't have been speaking with this woman.
Right.
By himself, with just her at this well. Yeah. How is your relationship now with Jonas, and do you think it would be a lot different moving forward, or is it kind of just like, because you mentioned you sort of let go, just let him be. Do you see that as sort of like the status quo right now?
Yeah, I think that's what's best for honoring his decision. And he knows that I pray that he would believe there is a loving God. And you'll notice that I have downgraded, like, the typical language would be like, believe that Jesus died for his sins. And like, right now I'm just like, listen, if you just one day came and said, you know what? I think there is a God and God exists and God loves me, I would be like, whew, thank you, Lord.
Yeah, yeah.
right now I'm just like honoring where he's at and trying not to disrespect where he is. And he knows what I think. Yeah. I don't have to tell him.
Right.
I don't have to do any of that stuff. And I also feel like his atheism right now is a tool in my relationship with God, because his decision to not believe has made me wrestle with God.
Yeah.
And that's a blessing. If he had not said, like, I don't really think there's a God, I would never have thought about this. And it will inform future relationships with other people who may not believe there's a God.
Yeah.
But that said, I think that letting go is a constant act of faith, where it's not a one and done thing. Like, I'm just going to let this go, because there are days where I grieve it. And I think one day when he decides to not work at the church anymore, which could be any day, that will be a grief, because I still am holding out hope that this particular community will allow him to see the love of God.
Yeah.
But the truth is that he could find that in a conversation with somebody at a bar too. So it's just like this constant work that I have to do. It's not his job.
What are your some, I guess, when you look back at raising Jonas and, I'm sorry, what was your other son?
Jude.
Mm-hmm. What are some of your favorite moments?
Man, I'm tearing up just thinking about, in the movies where the kid gets lost and then the mother has the flash of like all the memories and all those things, that it's like, that's kind of like, I loved being their mom. I still am their mom, but like I loved having the opportunity to be with them. I was really thankful that I didn't have to work at the time when they were little. And as they were growing up, I got to just bear witness to their incredible growth and development and joy and silliness. I don't know that I could pick out specific moments. I think what I am enjoying about them now in adulthood is how funny they are, and what deep conversations we have around that table with the four of us. And that is an honor to me that I have adult children that still want to come home. That feels really good. And maybe that's an assurance for me, not to compare, but an assurance that there may be kids that are towing the Christian line or still identifying as Christian or maybe working in ministry that don't want to come home. Like, I feel really thankful for wherever they are, they still know that they have a mom and a dad who really, truly loves them unconditionally.
Yeah. Anything that we left out that you wanted to bring up about your son or your topic, your thoughts on God?
I guess I would just say, if you're a parent and you have a child who does not believe in God, that I have nothing to tell you, because I don't know what I'm doing.
And we're ending the interview there.
I don't have the answers. And maybe that's okay. And maybe if someone's listening to this and they're like, I'm so upset that my child doesn't believe in God, just know that you're not alone, which sounds like such a cliche. But maybe knowing that you're not alone and that none of us really have the answers, maybe is strangely comforting. That it's okay if that is rattling or shaking your own faith. And I think that's really normal. And God is still in that. God's still in that. God is not outside or held back by my son's unbelief. So
thank you again. And I appreciate you really just sharing honestly where you're at. Just be able to say, I don't know. And I don't know what's going to happen next. And I really do hope this conversation helps somebody.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. I hope so. I hope so too. And thank you for creating a space where these conversations can happen. And thank you for being a person who is safe to talk to about those things. That feels really good. So yeah, I appreciate you.
Thanks, Regan.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Hello, friends. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Please leave a review and a rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever app you're using to listen to if you enjoyed this episode. Also, the best compliment you could leave me is to share this episode with other people, especially those who you feel like could benefit from these conversations. I'm looking forward to having more conversations like this in the future and sharing it with you guys. Until next time, peace.